We are Casa. We are Casa.
Happy New Year and welcome to the Power of One podcast. What an incredible year we have had. 2025 was absolutely amazing. I call it my pinch me moment, to be honest with you. So we were able to shoot and air 9 episodes of the Power of One. We opened Nevada's only Champions for Casa Connection Center. We swore in 236 CASA volunteers last year. And look around, we are here in our Champions for CASA Connection Center. This place is absolutely amazing, beyond our wildest dreams, to be totally honest with you. And so we've got a whole new look and sound. We've got our very own theme song with powerful lyrics and a powerful song track that really moves and emphasizes the work that we do here as CASA volunteers.
The power of love, the power of we.
And so we've also moved our podcast here permanently. So we're here now at our new home of the Connection Center. We're so happy. It's been thanks to people like you and all of our viewers who have made this such a special activity. And so we really just want to say thank you for being a part of the Power of One podcast.
Okay, we have got a very compelling topic today, and we are joined by our friend of Champions for CASA Judge Pickard, who everyone has seen before. I'm very excited to have you with us again today. As our viewers know, my co-host, Emilio, is active duty Marine, and he is serving right now, proudly serving his country. And so thank you so much for stepping in.
Absolutely, big shoes to fill. I don't know if I can quite fill those shoes, but I'm going to give it a try.
And Judge Pickard, I'll let you introduce our guest today.
We're excited today to have Ashley Kelly with us. Ashley is wonderful. She is a therapist who specializes in trauma therapy. She works with kids in foster care, especially the higher level kiddos who come in and have a lot of complex issues that they face, including but not limited to the trauma background, medication management. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today.
I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's
jump right in. So describe what trauma therapy is.
So there's a lot of versions of it that everyone will hear. I think my favorite definition of it that I've heard is from Gabor Mate, and he talks about trauma is not what happened to you. It's way more about what's happening inside you because of what happened to you.
So your perception.
Yeah, right? And so it's like for everyone, like if we all get in a car accident today, I may respond differently and be like, next day I'm back in my car driving, where you might go, no, I'm not getting in the car, right? So everyone's body responds differently to it. And so when you talk about what is trauma therapy, it's way more about what the individual's experiencing. And it's way an internal thing that we don't always get to see on the surface, where we kind of imagine being able to see it. So that's one of my favorite definitions to go down with, but just kind of looking at that spice of like, how do you actually treat that though? Because it's going to be different for everyone.
Which explains why when siblings grow up in the same house, some of them experience trauma and others have a very different perspective of what happened and what occurred because it's their internal perspective. Mm-hmm. That's understandable.
Yeah, and so it has so much to do with like the body and how the body's going to respond in that nervous system. So if my perspective of it was I was so unsafe because I was that younger sibling, or I watched everything happen to somebody else, where somebody who may have been experiencing, however, they were able to kind of fight back, even though they were the one in the altercation, they might have done better because their nervous system was actually able to say, oh, we got in a fight, I protected myself, and I was able to get out of it. Where a different somebody watching that will be terrified because their body just sat there panicking, right? So it's like helping the brain understand the experience and process it and understand, am I still safe or am I not safe? And that's one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have, where trauma is something that generally an experience happens, our fight or flight gets activated, and the reason why it keeps coming back or doesn't end is because your brain doesn't get the message that safety has come back to the body and that we're okay. And so that's like usually the biggest challenge of getting in, where it's like, how do we get children's minds especially back into their body and their brain to communicate and realize safety's here again.
Safety's here again. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I was just going to say, as a follow-up, you talked about trauma therapy. Does that mean there's other types of therapy that are different?
Sure. So lots of kind of things. There's different modalities. I would say the best like trauma therapies that you generally hear about You'll hear EMDR has become one of the biggest ones here. That's one that I've become trained in and everything, and working towards full certification. However, I'm a trained one, able to go do that. There's a new one called ART, and that's similar to EMDR, but it's more accelerated resolution therapy is what it stands for. So that one is becoming more popular as well. And then you have kind of like your trauma informed care, where they take CBT, which is maybe more of a common like talk therapy or maybe play therapy. However, the therapist themselves has become very trauma informed. So then they're watching for reactions or conversations. And trauma, a lot of the time, especially with our foster youth, has a lot to do with attachment struggles, right? And stuff where the attachment has been broken, the safety net of their attachments are often taken away from them, and sometimes repeatedly. And so when you're looking at how do we treat trauma, those are the main modalities that actually focus on trauma and actually we're working with the body and the mind and kind of trying to help the head and the body connect to that safety zone again.
How do kids arrive at your office? So, for example, if the Department of Family Services has a referral, do they refer somebody to you early in their stages of being in care, or is it because they've had, say, repeated offenses or incidents that it raises to the higher level?
So that all depends. That's a very complicated process. However, every state is slightly different. Generally, every state has a mandate that once a kid goes into foster care, immediately they are up for a psychological evaluation, mental health evaluation, and based off of those evaluations will depend on if they are needed to, oh, we definitely need some therapy. And generally when you're displaced, they already know, right? There's trauma there. They've lost all of their attachments. They've lost their family. So generally most kids want to see the therapy. You don't always see it as a necessary thing right away, depending on how they score on a lot of the evaluations, how they're doing, how they're presenting. Oftentimes they are not in the best place when they first enter. So they'll start in there, and then over time it might wean off. Or if the placements get displaced again, that's one of those things where you can kind of see where the consistency can be hard to treat.
Do you find that kiddos that come in to care and are placed with fictive kin, somebody they know, or family, they tend to do better and don't escalate as quickly?
I think with that familiarity, and if there's a previous relationship established, I think it does start. A lot of the times you see therapy needed a little bit later, when it's like, wait, where are my mom and dad? Why is auntie being with me instead? Or like, why is it grandma and grandpa? You know, those kind of things. And depending on the age level and understanding of kids, right? So oftentimes family is the best way to go and be able to have that. However, you still can see it. It comes down the road usually at some point.
Wonderful to know. I mean, it's really important because we always consider from the very first hearing, where can we place these kiddos? Do we place them with family? Do they have some friends called fictive kin? Where can they be placed to be as stable as possible? And of course, they have the right to attend their school of origin, which is the school they were attending at the time they came into care. And I've always viewed that as sometimes the only consistency in their life.
Right. At least there's some familiarity there, right? There's
Right.
some consistency.
Yeah. So that's where the biggest thing there, where it's like, that would always be the hope, right? Your next of kin, whatever it could be. However, sometimes that's not an option. But again, it's finding that safety balance for them. Because if you want reconnection and you want connection to happen for these kids again, to do any healing from that, you have to start at the basic levels. And if they're in a fight or flight response all the time, they're never going to find that safety. So when you're like looking to make those decisions, right, those are huge decisions to make sometimes. And it's like, whoa. And it's like, well, where do I find that safety? And then it becomes, okay, now the relationships are, where do I find? Statistics show like at least one relationship could be like a consistent, safe
Sibling relationship, for example.
Yes, different things where they have that and stuff. And generally one adult relationship as well and stuff where they can find that. So that could be that teacher that they like familiar with. It could be a CASA member someday, right? Where it's like, it's incredible, right?
So given that, so what are the goals with foster kids, or what does success look like?
As a trauma therapist in training, I like to call myself, I would say my goal for these kiddos is I want them to be able to take calm with them wherever they go. That's how I kind of put it and phrase it, where it's like, okay, if I've had success, I've taught this kid how to create a calm safety net within themselves to whatever environment they move to. And I also know I have to do that quickly because I may not get to have them very long. They may be moved somewhere else, something might change. And so when I use that perspective versus like when I have a kid coming to me with parents, right? I'm like, oh, I'm probably able to treat you for a year or two. I might treat you your whole life at some point, right? Like I'm still beginning stages and stuff, but I'm starting to see clients that I've seen for over 2, almost 3 years now, which is kind of exciting for me. However, when I look at like my foster kids, I definitely have to take that face where it's like, how many skills can I get them to be able to where they're able to regulate their nervous system? They're able to create a safe space for them and learn how to find a safe person.
Do you find kids that are placed with their siblings do tend to come out, have better outcomes overall?
I think they do have better outcomes because they're generally able to have that connection, right? And that's one of the biggest things there. And a lot of the times that's one of those real struggles for them where it's like when they're sitting there, why don't you feel safe? And you're in a safe home, everything's like, but what about my brother? So the constant anxiety, the constant worry of their family members, they might be in a safe home, but their body and brain are not signaling to them that they are safe and that their family's safe. And that's what they care about at the end of the day, even if they come from a really rough background.
I mean, familiarity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of it. I want what's normal to me may not be quote unquote normal to someone else, right? And that's what I find with some of the kids is they've gone through these horrific experiences, but to them, it's kind of the way that I've grown up, right? It's what I've become used to, and
it's normal and stuff. And that's where a lot of the times that I would say that's like one of the other things where it's kind of like, not that I want to teach them that what they have is not normal. However, I'm not really teaching them how to deal with chaos. I'm teaching them how to be comfortable in a calm space because they don't know, they're not familiar with that calm space. So when there is a calm, safe space, sometimes they freak out even more because their nervous system isn't ready for that. They don't even know what to do with that. That's a new feeling, and new to them often means unsafe.
An issue comes up quite frequently in court where we'll have a visitation set up for the parent, right? The parent will have parenting time with the kiddo, and then they'll come back from that and they'll have a meltdown at the foster home, or they'll have a meltdown with extended family. And then sometimes the recommendation to the court is, well, let's stop visits. And I'm thinking, but they're probably just really upset that they can't see their parent. And so it's probably a normal reaction. So how would you respond to that if somebody said, well, the child is having a breakdown once they get back to the foster home or the care home after a parental visit? Does that indicate that that's an unhealthy contact or relationship?
I wouldn't say unhealthy contact. I would definitely say, right, the behavior is communicating something to us. So right there, what is that communicating to me? The attachment struggle is still there. They just lost their family over again. Every time you can kind of expose that and open that wound a little bit. However, to deny that wound can be even more damaging, right? And so it's more about, okay, if that's what's happening every time and the behaviors are so unmanageable, I might also start with, okay, who's the most closest relationship that is an adult who might be able to have them have a conversation so that they're able to decompress after that visit? Or is it possible to have a therapy session? I go visit the parents and then I go visit the therapist so the therapist can help me kind of talk out what I just experienced, get prepared, calm my body. Or do I have an adult who's trained to be able to give like kind of those nervous system regulation techniques for me to kind of process, kind of go through that visit that I have with my family and re-enter my foster home in a better state versus all I'm thinking about is how my mom just left me again. And now I have to go back to these people, right? And the shift changes, and like in a couple of days, they might come down and they're not these people. They are these foster that I love and care for.
And I worry about that specifically. Like I worry that when the recommendation by the child's therapist is, well, it seems to dysregulate them. They're really upset by the visit. I just think that seems like a typical response for kids to be dysregulated because they were broken up from their family, and to see their family, it's not necessarily, as I understand it, a sign of trauma. It is a sign of trauma, but not that they're unhealthy. Not that they shouldn't see those parents.
I think that's reminding providers, because I think therapists can even get caught in that, different professionals, where it's like we start looking at the behavior only, and that's where some of this, that tells me you're not trauma informed, right? Because I'm like, you're only paying attention to the behavior of what this child is doing, and we're going, this isn't okay. This behavior isn't good for them. We're really, their body's attempting to regulate and communicate. And if we could interstep in between those breakdowns and actually go, they're trying to process it. Their brain and their body's trying to heal from that. And if we were to step in a little bit more and help them regulate through that, that's what's going to create healing versus nope, you just never get to do that again. And what the child hears is, my mom's not coming to visit me anymore. And now they spend however long going, mom doesn't care anymore.
Well, I wonder too, as you're talking about that, as a CASA volunteer, I've never thought to share some of that information with the therapist, right? To be able to say, this is what I experience and this is what the child says to me, right? I always respect the fact that obviously confidential information can't be shared back for things that are discussed in therapy. But I guess that's a question. Like, is it something that you would want to hear from somebody in that child's life to say, what my experience is when they go and see mom or dad, they come back and no one's explaining to them what's happening, why. And so they're naturally coming up with themselves, well, it must be mom doesn't want to see me, or it must be the judge says I'm not allowed, or, my CASA volunteer is the bad guy and says I shouldn't see them anymore. Like, they're left to make their own conclusions at that point.
I would say the biggest thing is, like, as a therapist, like, the more information I can be given and the more experiences that I'm able to hear, the more I'm able to take into the therapy room, especially if these are like younger guys, right? And stuff where it's mostly I'm playing with them. And in that play is where I get these little snippets of their dialogue and their inner world of how they play and what they're doing with their different characters or stuff, right? So it's like, if I have that information, I'm able to go, okay, I'm going to mimic and talk about this. And it might be through play a little bit more, or it might be a teenager where we can actually talk about it a little bit more, but we're going to work kind of through that and start talking about it. Where if I don't know, and we just go, if I'm just presented with something that says they just dysregulate, and like, because that's what I think I've seen more often, stuff where there's not enough context of what's actually going on. It's just like, they freak out after they see mom every time. It's probably not a great thing. I would worry about it right away if anyone asked me to sign something as a recommendation as a therapist, to be like, yeah, like no contact with mom. I'd have a million questions before I ever signed that paper, right?
Right. And I worry about that. So that's why I was curious.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the benefit of a therapist between the visit and the home, the foster home they're living. And so it's, you're dependent on the foster parent to kind of help them regulate and learn to calm down. And it's also indicative, I think, of just that child's overall trauma.
Well, that's where I was going to go, right? I mean, I look at it and say, trauma factor to me is this, right? We've got a child who's gone through whatever that particular case, whatever they've personally experienced. But at the end of the day, no matter what, if they're in foster care, they've been removed from their home, they've been removed from the people they know, they are in an entirely new environment, all new things around them. They have new home, everything changes, right? Like, I always describe it as, one of the kids that I'm working with has been in 17 different homes, right? And so 17 times that child has had to say, what are the rules in this house? What are the smells in this house? What's the food like in this house, right? What are the religious beliefs, the smells, the food, like all of it, even language in some cases. And so I think about all of that and think, would I be angry? Yeah. I'd be very angry, right? I'd have big reactions to things. And so what is some advice that you have for CASA volunteers who are untrained in trauma cases specifically?
So yeah, it's going to be whatever it is to get the nervous system regulated and getting them calm. And so sometimes it's as simple as a check-in, where it's like, what are you, like, my favorite question, like, people always are like, how are you feeling, right? And so we start there, but then it's like, what are you feeling and where do you feel that? If the kid says I'm sad, where do you feel that? Teaching them how to connect with it in their body and stuff. And so it's like, where do you feel that in your body? And sometimes kids will look at you and go, what are you talking about? And so you slowly have to think about it. But usually, fear, like, yeah, is it fear? Are they able to label those emotions? And like, we have our lovely, like, Inside Out world now from our, like, so the children, it's definitely helping a little bit, where it's like, well, is sadness showing up for you, or is joy hanging out with, like, so there's that for the kiddos and stuff. But then our teens, they're a little bit more, they might not want to share it as much and they might be a little bit guarded. But if you have that relationship, but it's teaching them, where is it in your body?
So how are you feeling? Where are you feeling it in your body? Yeah. And then what would be like the third?
And that third one would kind of be like, I kind of do like a meter with them, and I kind of go, is it getting bigger? Is it getting smaller? Depending if it's a kid or, whatever kind of. And then I just have them kind of sit, and either like we breathe sometimes. This is where some of the trauma therapy does really help, where it's like the bilateral feedback. So sometimes they can do like tapping on their knees, tapping on the sides of your head. You can do the butterfly tap. So you can kind of make it fun with kids, or you can be a little bit more like with the teens and stuff in their range and stuff, where it's like, And some respond okay and they're willing to kind of do that, and some are not. If they're not willing to do it, just taking deep breaths, or what are the grounding things, getting them grounded back into the present moment again, which sometimes it's if you're driving in the car and they're having to take them back to their foster, it might be a little bit like, oh, like, what are 5 things you can see right now, and have them name and get back into that present moment.
Well, this has been tremendous, so valuable and helpful. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much.
So fun to be
Amazing
here.
co-host. So I think we will wrap it up at this point and say thank you to our viewers for being a part of the Power of One podcast. And just remember, if these kinds of conversations intrigue you and you're thinking about what these kids are experiencing and you want to get involved, we need the help. We need CASA volunteers. We need people working in the social welfare, child welfare, in all different aspects. So please get involved, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.